Hello, and thank you for tuning in from wherever you are in the world for this Veterans Month event with the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. Today is the last day of Veterans Month, and we are very excited to take this time to feature the role that military veterans are playing in the clean energy transition. My name is Dan Mish, a U.S. Navy veteran, founder and co-director of the Veterans Advanced Energy Project, and co-chair of the Invenergy Veterans Network. Invenergy is the largest privately owned developer of wind and solar in the US and is the founding sponsor of the Veterans Advanced Energy Project, which is housed within the Global Energy Center. I will be your moderator for this session, and I am pleased to be joined by a distinguished group of veterans as they discuss their experience transitioning from the military to the energy industry and reflect on the importance of the energy transition to national security. In addition to Invenergy, I'd also like to thank the American Resilience Project, Consumers Energy, the Department of Labor, Native Renewables, and Sonalists for their partnership in organizing today's event. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. The event is on the record, and we are currently live streaming on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We encourage you to post about what you hear today and share on social media using the hashtag VetsInEnergy and by tagging us at AC Global Energy and Vets_Energy. If you would like to participate in the conversation, we encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A portal located at the bottom of your screen at any time during the event, and we will incorporate them as appropriate. To kick things off, I have the privilege of introducing Mr. James Rodriguez, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Department of Labor's Veterans Employment and Training Service, known as VETS. President Biden nominated Mr. Rodriguez to be the DOL Assistant Secretary for VETS, and he is currently awaiting Senate confirmation. Mr. Rodriguez is an executive leader and proud veteran with over 30 years of experience in the U.S. government, corporate sector, and the United States Marine Corps, where he served for 21 years on active duty. His recent executive experience includes leadership roles within Deloitte, BAE Systems, and he also previously served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Office of Warrior Care Policy, Office of the Secretary of Defense from 2014 through 2017. We are very fortunate to have Mr. Rodriguez joining us today.
Good morning, Dan, and thank you, everyone. I can tell you, I want to thanks for the opportunity to join you in recognizing the value of veterans and their role in the clean energy transition. I can tell you, we at the Department of Labor and Vets join you and our fellow Americans in saluting the service of our veterans and service members, as well as those sacrifices made by their families. I also want to thank the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center and Veterans Advanced Energy Project for hosting this event that allows us to reflect on the service and contributions of our nation's veterans and service members. In addition, I would like to share some thoughts in honor of those who served our nation. So next slide, please. Thank you. Recently, our nation marked the tragic anniversary of 9/11. And after 20 years of war, we also witnessed a chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. These events and the images on this slide evoke a lot of emotions, especially for those who served and their families. These images also represent 2 decades of combat deployments, valor and sacrifice that saw nearly 6,800 Americans killed and over 52,000 wounded. One of these great Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice is Sergeant Nicole Gee, pictured on the bottom right, holding an infant Afghan refugee. She posted that photo on Instagram and captioned it with, "I love my job." A week later, on August 26th, she was killed along with 12 other service members in a suicide bomber attack outside Kabul's airport. So I hope you honor, as well as I do, the 4.5 million post 9/11 veterans who served in this war and those like Sergeant Gee who made the ultimate sacrifice. The struggles of some of our veterans are a justifiable concern for all Americans. As a post 9/11 veteran and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Office of Warrior Care Policy, I have seen firsthand the sacrifices borne by service members, veterans, and their families. As you all know, many carry with them the wounds of war, visible and invisible, and grieve the irreplaceable loss of their teammates. And while we have made great progress towards ensuring that all who need care get it, it is important to acknowledge that much work still remains. There's a broken veteran narrative that is too often used to focus only on the struggles while omitting the well-documented and research achievements of post 9/11 veterans. And this misused narrative of the broken veteran can overshadow the entire story of our talented veterans who volunteered to serve this nation in a time of war, many of whom are on the screen today. It is our responsibility to address those in need, but also to promote the demonstrated value of all veterans in our workforce, communities, and society. Next slide, please. As our country emerges from the longest war in history, the good news is that 4.5 million veterans who served during this war are poised to lead the clean energy transition and the U.S. economy into the next decades. Our post 9/11 veterans have channeled their talent, skills, and leadership into post-military success, achieving higher labor participation rates and over 30% higher earnings than their non-veteran peers, according to the Census Bureau. Veterans have proven themselves to be extremely productive, often earning promotions at an accelerated rate in their chosen career fields and recognized by industry leaders as valuable teammates. Next slide, please. Our post 9/11 veterans are a formidable group, as you all know. They are the youngest, most diverse, and largest group of veterans in the labor force. Like the legions of veterans who served in the past, they have carried on a legacy of duty, valor, and compassion. Our post 9/11 veterans have fought bravely in defense of our values, but they've also demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability, pivoting to support missions ranging from humanitarian assistance to local economic development. And needless to say, they perform admirably. While in uniform, veterans benefited not just from world-class technical training, but also from extraordinary opportunities to develop soft skills such as teamwork, resourcefulness, and initiatives, traits that employers constantly rank as among the most desirable. Simply said, hiring veterans is not just the right thing to do, it's a smart business decision. And as a business leader, I can tell you, and I want to emphasize that it is a smart business decision. This war was the first war in our nation's history fought by an all-volunteer force of tremendous men and women who stepped forward to serve. And as you all know, one of President Biden's priorities is his Build Back Better plan, including tackling the climate crisis, and I quote, empowering American workers and businesses to lead a clean energy revolution. Like you, I am also excited for the emerging opportunities for veterans in clean energy. I believe we have a real opportunity to create clean energy industry pathways for veterans and for all Americans, especially those in underserved populations, by leveraging apprenticeships and other training programs that lead to industry-recognized credentials and a great career. These credentials, combined with experience in the industry, also lead to entrepreneurial and business ownership opportunities for veterans. Now, as our nation moves forward, our post 9/11 veterans stand ready to build back better. And we honor those veterans, not just for their service while in uniform, but also for their ongoing contributions to the world's most talented workforce. So again, thank you for the opportunity to join us today. And we and the entire team at VETS stand ready to support your efforts as we enable all transitioning service members, veterans, and military spouses to reach their full potential in the workplace.
Mr. Rodriguez, thank you very much for joining us and thank you for your remarks. We have a few extra minutes, and so I just thought I would ask you a couple questions. Specifically, what are some of the difficulties that veterans face when they're making the transition from the military to civilian careers?
Hey, thanks for that question, Dan. I get asked that question quite a bit, and I often, to make sure I try to have the correct answer here, is I often speak to many veterans about this and get their thoughts on what is the difficulties that they see, because I want to make sure that I'm understanding exactly what our veterans are experiencing. And the truth is that a lot of veterans are trying to understand where they can utilize their skill sets in their next career, right? And what I tell them is look for that operative word, career, not just a job. So that way you can use the skill sets that you have, whether they are tangible skill sets or soft skills, as I mentioned, but where they can use them in a job that they're passionate about, in a job that's growing, and in a market that's going to continue to grow, so they can get into career, just like they did in the military, that's going to have longevity, but also continue growth. So helping them identify what those career fields are, such as clean energy, for example, is something that we try to do here at DOL Vets, and we try to get them to understand how these markets are going to be available in the long term, how they can use their skill sets to match what the market needs.
Thank you. Yeah, that resonates with me personally. I didn't have a clear idea of what I was going to do after I served in the Navy, and clean energy has really given me that opportunity to continue serving the country by improving our fight against climate change and the economic opportunities that are coming with clean energy. For companies and recruiters that may be joining us today, what are some of the best practices that you recommend for those companies that are looking to help and hire veterans?
Yeah, another great question, and is as I mentioned again earlier, is that from an industry leader standpoint, I can tell you it's not as easy as it always sounds, right? We have a tremendous amount of companies looking to hire veterans, and they all say that they cannot hire enough veterans, and so we're definitely trying to help them meet those needs and the demands. That said, I think it's really imperative for companies to understand how to include the veteran in the business. And what I mean by that is not only understanding what their job is, but what the business goal and missions are. So as you know, those of us who served, we are mission oriented, right? We want to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and what are the goals and the outcomes. And I think companies have to be able to get veterans to understand that and allow it to resonate with those veterans so they can see how their input into what the organization mission is really allows them a better understanding of what they're doing, what the goals of the organization are, and allows them to really buy into what they are doing. To your point, if you are passionate about the environment, you're passionate about what it means to our society in general, then that's something that you're going to do well, right? And just like you did in the military, you're going to do it well because you're passionate about the mission. And I think we have to get veterans to understand how their role really ties into the overall mission of the organization.
Yeah, that's great. I had a boss here at Invenergy whose number one leadership principle was, if someone's doing something and doesn't know why, then the system is broken. Right. Very important that everyone understands the goal that we're all working towards and why we do the things the way that we do. Well, I do want to thank you again for joining us. I know you're out on the West Coast and appreciate your early morning here, and wishing you the great rest of your day.
Well, thank you. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you all today. And I look forward to hearing all the great things that you all continue to do here at the Atlantic Council.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. So at this time, I'd like to turn our attention to the remaining distinguished members of our panel. It is my pleasure to introduce Kevin Johnson, a U.S. Army veteran and board director of the American Resilience Project. Kevin is also an advisory committee member of the Veterans Advanced Energy Project. Ian Masayezva, who is a U.S. Navy veteran and a solar technician at Native Renewables. Sarah Nielsen, who is an Army veteran and executive director of transportation, renewables, and storage at Consumers Energy, as well as a former Veterans Advanced Energy Fellow at the Council. And Robin Tyner, a Navy veteran and senior oceanographer and principal analyst at Sonalists, another former Veterans Advanced Energy Fellow with the Council. Kevin, I think I'd like to start with you just to share a little bit about your transition from the military to an energy career and how your work in clean energy has fueled your passion since leaving the military.
Sure, Dan. Thanks for the opportunity to join here, and thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us. So my transition seems like light years ago, was in 2008 is when I left the military. Sorry, 2007. I had the great fortune to go to business school in my transition, which gave me some time to think about kind of what I wanted to do after my military service. And the key reason I got into clean energy was really as a result of my deployment to Iraq in 2004, 2005. Watching oil fires burn and having my soldiers ask me every day, what are we doing here? When are we going home? And what are we doing here? Maybe really think about, what were we doing? Strategically, and kind of what I wanted to do after my military service. So it's what kind of really prompted me to pursue a career in clean energy. So again, I was very fortunate to have a business school experience to transition me from the active duty into the private sector. But it was still pretty uncertain at that time in 2008. After my first year, there weren't many clean energy companies in the country, and there weren't many pathways to get to them. And there wasn't really technology like we have today to really reach out to folks. So it was like a lot of you are doing here, spending time, trying to network, just trying to hear stories about other folks' transitions, and finding those commonalities and those pathways. So I got my start in the clean energy space here in Chicago, where I reside in the wind sector with a company called Acciona, which is one of the largest wind companies in the world, with U.S. headquartered in Spain, with U.S. headquarters here in the Chicagoland area. But I've been extremely fortunate to work for some large companies, start my own companies, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, and work with some very, very interesting, fast-paced teams. But the key thing I would highlight, as I've expressed to Dan in his transition from the Navy, seems like many years ago, is that the great thing that you have out there is folks that have been down this path for now over a decade, creating organizations like Dan's created here, organizations like the Solar Ready Vets program, which is a great resource for veterans out there. The Clean Energy Leadership Institute, which is a great resource for you to tap into. They exist, and there's folks that want to connect with you. That's why we're here to talk to you today. So I'll share a bit more about my transition and some of my experiences. But the key thing I want to highlight is that there's a lot of resources out there. The key thing is you just need to reach out and tap into them and be persistent in your approach.
Kevin, thank you. Yeah, and I agree. I found that when I got out of the Navy and came to Chicago, going to as many events and shaking hands with as many people, networking, really took a couple months, almost a year, to really start paying back. But I have you personally to thank. We met in Chicago, and you were instrumental in my getting into clean energy. And I did eventually go to grad school, not during the transition, but I do think that education in school definitely had a big factor in the success of my transition. Sarah, I'd like to turn to you and see, if you could share a little bit about your exit from the military, maybe anything that Kevin shared that stood out to you, and any challenges that you faced.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. So yeah, I think the biggest challenge that both of you are talking about is you don't know what you don't know when you leave the military. I did ROTC in college and went straight through, right through into the active duty, and my summers in college were filled up with ROTC activities. So I wasn't doing, internships with my classmates. So I didn't know what I didn't know. And so similar to Kevin, I got out and went to graduate school to learn and to kind of buy myself some time just to kind of figure out what to do next. And then my next step after graduate school was consulting, which is another place where you can kind of get a broad view of things and learn a lot. So I got to see a bunch of different companies on the inside and how they work and what the day-to-day is like. It wasn't in the energy field, but it was still really helpful just to get a sense of what the day-to-day could look like for some of these places. I also did internships in graduate school at nonprofits. So I was trying to just get a sense of what's the day-to-day look like. So I did both of those things. And then also to both of your points, networked heavily. So when it was time to leave consulting and to dig into energy, I was doing so many phone calls just to get a sense of what's the right place for me. Is it project management? Is it finance? Is it venture capital? Is it operations? And ultimately, where I've landed here at the electric utility company came about because I went to a random networking event in person in the city where I happened to be living. And that kind of led to some connections. So you never really know the in-person stuff, the phone calls. But once I finally made the choice to come here, I felt really good about it because I had done all that background. So that was a challenge, and then how I came across it.
Yeah, you mentioned internships, and I think that is something that I didn't have the opportunity to do myself, but would think that there's a lot of really great resources out there. The Hiring Our Heroes and Solar Ready Vets fellowships, for example, that have some solar specific opportunities. In California, there's the Veterans to Energy Careers, which is also internships. And here in Chicago is a group called Code Platoon that is helping veterans in computer science find jobs in that field as well, which definitely has energy applications in what we do. So I appreciate that. Ian, interested to hear what your transition was like and how the military helped you find the new career that you have today.
Hey, good morning, everybody. That's a similar question. How I'll answer like the rest of them. It was rocky at first. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. My background was in avionics, so I figured I would be a shoo-in for some type of aviation type job. But it wasn't as simple as I thought it would be. A lot of Kevin had mentioned, a lot of individuals, a lot of companies that, veterans, hiring veterans, and we'll employ veterans, but that wasn't always the case. When I submitted my resumes, I never received any phone calls or any follow-up. So that was a hard part. After 2 years looking around, looking for different jobs, I'm still unsure what I wanted to do. I decided to go back to college. Being an aviation guy, I thought, I'd stick with avionics. It would be something similar. I would be able to breeze through. So I achieved a degree in network engineering, but that still didn't seem to fit well with me. So I went back to further my education and went into environmental engineering. It wasn't until then that I figured out, this is something that I'm interested in. I'm Native American from a village in Hopeville, Arizona, and I was raised without electricity or running water, and my family are a bunch of farmers. So when I growing up, I kind of looked down on it. I didn't really think it was a viable job for people. But now that I've retired from the service and I've seen what's all out there, I realized, hey, what I need to do is, right in my backyard. And that kind of is what sparked my interest in solar energy, renewable energy. And funny thing is, we had solar since the 80s, early 80s. And I didn't know very much about it. I knew there was these panels sitting on our roofs that would produce energy. I didn't know how, I didn't know anything about it. But it wasn't until my environmental classes that I realized, what, everything is right in my backyard, and I should have. And I think that's kind of what sparked my interest. Well, that is what sparked my interest in renewable energy. Plus, at that time, I was able to do a couple internships with some local nonprofits in permaculture. And so with that, I used my military background in electricity. I was trained in electricity, and that helped me into an easier transition into learning PV, photovoltaics, and whatnot. So that's kind of how renewable energy fell into my lap. It was under my nose this entire time, and didn't even realize it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I experienced a similar problem when I got out of the Navy. I studied physics and certified as a nuclear engineer for submarines. And I started applying for nuclear engineer jobs. And I worked closely with naval reactors, for those who are familiar with that, and thought that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission would be a great place to go. But after so many months of not getting any callbacks, not getting interviews, I had to start looking elsewhere, and ended up finding a project manager opportunity with the Department of Energy that really kind of kick-started things for me. So sometimes you think your job hunt is going to go one way and it doesn't work out, and you just got to pivot. And sometimes it's about being at the right place at the right time. And Ian, I do also want to recognize that today, in addition to the last day of Veterans Day, is the last day of National Native American Heritage Month. So I grant you a happy month, or end of the month, to you there as well. Robin is our last panelist here. We are interested to hear, what it was like for you leaving the Navy and transitioning into a civilian career, and what draws you to energy.
Hey, good morning. I think I was always an environmentalist pretty much my whole life, just as a kid. Just starts with, liking little animals. And I had a strange ability to, catch little rabbits and birds and mice in the backyard. And I don't know why, but snakes, whatever, it didn't matter. But then I was actually on active duty for 32 years before I left. So I think that's a whole different set of challenges than, people get out after 5 or 8. Partly because there's a military culture, which I think is wonderful, but it really is different. And there are so many things just culturally that someone said, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you're doing that you don't know, or just expectations from everything from how long people will work, how much guidance they need, how much how much is give a mission versus give a task type of direction. So there's so many things I think I found culturally a little different. But while I stayed involved with environmental organizations the whole time I was in the Navy. And I was part of, I was fortunate. I was in a position to be part of impacting some of the big, big initiatives like Task Force Climate Change and the Navy Arctic Roadmap, and the Task Force Energy. And those all happened around, we started talking around 2008. They came out in 2009, 2010. But those lasted for a long time, and they set a roadmap for a lot of our actions. And then my background, I was undergrad is physics and then master's in oceanography and meteorology. So that ties in. And I certainly didn't intend to set myself up as working in the Pentagon, setting up these big task force. But then several years later, I ended up at the Office of Naval Research, where I oversaw a lot of the programs that were in support of Task Force Climate Change or energy or the Arctic Roadmap for sure, because I had 80% of the DoD Arctic research was under my department portfolio. So I felt like I was always kind of touching it, but it was never a primary job. And then I got out and I thought somehow this is what I want to do. And that's really hard. Because first there's the whole cultural things to overcome. And I moved again. So I moved to somewhere where I didn't know a soul. So my son could attend a school. I actually moved a few months before I retired and commuted to DC, but moved up to New Hampshire, didn't know anybody. And then I started with, well, how do I get to know somebody? And now what I do with myself, since I'm used to working, 12 hours a day. And now I'm not. And I joined a local planning board. I got on my municipal planning board. And then I met someone, I just went to some local thing. They're doing a climate thing. So I just went and showed up and started talking to a guy who I didn't realize had helped put it on. And then they find out I'm an oceanographer and a meteorologist. So hey, can you join our energy committee? So, okay, I could be on the energy committee. And then you meet up with other people doing a harbor tour and, well, we should be doing all these great things and we're not. And we formed a group that basically got a warrant article passed, which is like a local ballot initiative to create a sustainability office. And then we got a sustainability committee formed. And I'm like, great, I'm doing all the stuff, but I'm not getting paid a penny of it, but I'm working as hard as ever. And so I'm still missing the boat. And I just through some friends that I had known, because I'd been on the board for an environmental group, and I got back on the board of Conservatives for Responsible Stewardship. And then a friend from another organization had linked me to Deploy US. And I was a senior fellow for them for 2 years. They kind of do a rotation. And they're really, Deploy US is really focused on climate and trying to balance donor funding and stuff like that, so that it's across the political spectrum. So we take the politics out of it and just, it's fine to fund, left, right, or center organizations, but let's fund it all and try to come up with the scope of solutions, not just one size fits all solution. And so through that, I met more people and I got invited to speak at EarthX Dallas a couple times. There was actually a Veterans Energy panel. And so I went out there a couple of years in a row up until COVID. And so that was neat. And then I met other people and then got asked to sit on panels for film festivals. But I still haven't cracked the nut, because I might get paid towards travel expenses or get an honorarium for, I did one a couple weeks ago in Connecticut, but I don't think I've cracked the nut for making that a career. But along the way, I picked up the job with Sonalists, and that organization is it's employee owned, and half of our partners are veterans. So while there's a lot of defense contracting, computer science and software like that, they have left the door open to anything that you can make a team across our partners with the skill set to go pursue, go for it. So there's a couple of us kind of real interested in some Arctic initiatives that we're looking at.
Yeah, I think in working with you and other Navy oceanographers and ocean engineering majors, it's enlightening for me to recognize how important your work is to understanding climate change and the study of and response to that issue. With your retirement, I'm curious to know if there's specific advice that you would give to someone who is maybe a year out from retiring. People come to me and I only did my 5 years. And so being 25 is a lot different perspective, and curious to know maybe what your top suggestion would be.
Well, I mean, everyone tells you network, and that's true. And I had a killer network, I mean, I had the whole E-ring on, my cell phone, and I could call anyone up, and if they retired before me, they were, Northrop Grumman or Boeing or, L3 Harris or Lockheed. And so I know people everywhere, but I realized that what I still know is my circle of friends and colleagues that I had served with for the last umpteen years. I'm doing a project now with a guy that I served with 3 times in DC and twice in Norfolk. And so the hardest thing, I think, is expanding your network to get further out. And I think the local stuff I did was good, but I think I probably, and a little bit was hard because COVID came and then everything got canceled. But I think when I was starting to get just into more events and arenas that weren't just, all my same friends from DOD, that was what was really maybe going to pay some dividends, but it kind of came to a screeching halt. And I hadn't been out for very long when, COVID hit, maybe a year and a half or so. And honestly, I took care of my dad for like a year and a half before I went and got, even worked as sonologist. So yeah, I think the in-person networking is good, and just expanding the scope, because there's so many things going on in the energy environmental community. And I guess, I'm sorry, I'm talking a long time, but I kind of got to realize that there's like, these circles, almost looks like the Olympics with all the overlapping circles, where there'd be the circles of, if you go to the AMS conference, American Meteorological Society, or American Geophysical Union conference, or all these scientific conferences, you see all the same people all the time and all your old friends, and you're talking about all this stuff, and they're in academia or government or whatever. And then, there's the other circle, which is all the DOD people, and they go to all the same conferences and see each other. And then started going to things like the EarthX ones, and then there's another circle, and it's like how to make all these circles link up and match up. And
yeah, your remarks started, you said you don't know what you don't know, and I think that's reflected here in your advice, which is get out of your comfort zone, because if you just stick with the same patterns and the same people, then you're not necessarily going to be able to expand and run after retirement. And I think that would be very helpful. And Ian, you also retired, and so I'm curious to know what would be your top advice for someone who is, say, a year away or maybe closer to retirement.
For me, I guess it's a little bit different for retirees and people who are just I don't want to say just spent 5 years, but they put in their 5 years, 4 years, whatever it may be. But what I would recommend is, take some time off. For myself, I had to take some time off. I'm not sure, everybody's financial situation is a little bit different, but take some time off, and then, go do something, go visit other areas. And that's kind of what helped me out. I have 2 sons that were twins. They were in their senior year of high school. And I watched them. They're athletes, so they moved into their collegiate career and ran for college. But I took 2 years just to follow them along, and just that little transition, kind of jumping out of the military spotlight, the military atmosphere, and kind of experiencing the civilian life. For me, that was a big help, and that's pretty much what jump started my idea to go to college. So for somebody, a retiree who's putting in over 20 years, deciding to get out, I'd say take some time off first, and then you had mentioned step out of your comfort zone. Look at those positions, or look at. You also want to know where you think you want to retire, where you want to move, and look in that local area and just kind of brainstorm what. You might be a pilot, you might be an avionics technician, you might be, a boatswain's mate, what have you. Look at your set of skills and how could you use that for another type of job, not that same particular job, but whatever you learned during your military career, how could you utilize that for a position in your local area? And that's something that I pretty much looked at first, spending 22 years in the service. When you move up, you're constantly mentoring individuals, you're guiding individuals, you're in charge of this and that, and you're constantly go, 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 go. As Robin said, we're used to working 12-hour minimum days, no problem. So I kind of wanted to move away from that. I wanted to just be my own guy. I wanted to be a delivery truck driver. I wanted to be a dish installer guy. But it's something inside of me, and each individual is a little bit different. If you spend that much time in the service, I'm sure you'll realize that, you were groomed, you were trained, you grew, and you're gonna you will want something more than just yourself. Satisfying yourself. You want to, train other people. You want to mentor more people. So when I looked at that in myself, I started looking outside the circle, so to speak. And I looked at permaculture. Permaculture was something that I didn't think I would be interested in, but holy cow, it's a whole set of a whole different network of individuals that I've got to know, and that's what linked me to Native Renewables. They were doing installations with permaculture. The permaculture company was installing homes, and they were putting solar renewable energy, and that's what networked me to Native Renewables. But so yeah, that's what I would say. It's kind of a long-winded answer. Just look at where you want to go, take some time off, think outside the box, go out of your comfort zone, and utilize the skills that you earn from service. And, they're not going to let you down.
Yeah, I can really appreciate that. When I transitioned out of the military, I took about 6 months off. I didn't get 2 years, unfortunately. My brother also served in the Navy, and he had 2 young kids. And so he actually didn't have the same opportunity. He really had the pressure of, keeping the roof over their heads and food on the table. So really the pressure for him, like so many others who are maybe earlier in their careers, have more pressure. I think that is interesting advice that you would give to a retiree who has flexibility to, give yourself that opportunity to decompress, because you say 12 hours, but we all know it's in the military, it's 24/7. And mentorship, you mentioned, is also, I think, very important. It was hugely helpful for me, both informal and formal. I participated in the American Corporate Partners Fellowship. There's also Veterati out there. But even, for people who maybe find their first job, finding an informal mentor from someone who's been with the company can be really important. With that, Kevin, I think I would shift this to you to see what advice you have for military service members or recently departed veterans who are, needing some advice on how to make the transition into clean energy.
Sure. And I think, the other panelists have hit on some really, really great points around networking, and it's something I harp on a lot. Another thing I would harp on pretty aggressively is research. Definitely spend your time doing your research. Read as much as you can about trends and where things are going, and opportunities you may not be thinking about. As an example, understanding what are your post 9/11 GI Bill rights. Maybe to pursue some classes. Maybe it's not going to school full time, but maybe meshing the basic allowance for housing with some classes that may give you, like Ian's mentioned, some time in that transition to cover your housing costs, take care of your family, give yourself some time to think and do some research, but not necessarily immersed in a full-time degree. I think myself and others have mentioned, going to grad school. I can imagine we have a large audience of folks separating that may be enlisted, that may have not gone to college yet, or may not be interested in doing that. I can tell you that I've worked with and mentored several enlisted soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that have transitioned from active duty, that have progressed tremendously in this sector without college degrees. Another thing I would recommend in you're thinking about transition is a lot of times we harp on wind, solar, battery storage, all technologies of which I've worked with over my career. But another, I think, key thing to look at and do a lot of research on and think about is, the future of electric mobility. Thinking about if you're let's say a driver of sorts in the military, I would highly recommend that you receive your CDL license before you transition out. I can tell you one of the hottest commodities right now is folks that have a CDL license. Maybe you don't want to be a driver yourself, but maybe you want to start a small company to expand in opportunities. I can tell you that's going to be a major area of growth. Ian hit on some key points on, he found his career right in his backyard. I think that's one of the key themes I would say from my perspective is that these opportunities aren't only in big cities like Chicago or New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles. These opportunities are right in your backyard. Maybe you're stationed in Norfolk and you're longing to go home in Nebraska. Well, I can tell you that your local utility or electric co-op would be, a great opportunity for you to network, get out of your comfort zone, meet those folks that would have opportunities right in your backyard. And maybe it's not working with that co-op or utility. Maybe it's starting your own venture yourself. As a veteran, you're going to be very attractive for various grants and programs under the recent infrastructure bill or existing legislation that's out there through the Department of Agriculture, Department of Labor, other programs. So again, harping on the research side, do a lot of reading, find those gems out there. Because I can tell you as a veteran, you're going to be very, very a good opportunity for you. And someone earlier mentioned, being at the right place at the right time. From my perspective, I know it's a crazy world with all things COVID, but I couldn't imagine a better time to be getting out of the military, to be looking at a sector like this. And whether you define clean energy, again, as, wind, solar, battery storage, electric mobility, maybe it's in agriculture, starting some type of sustainable agriculture opportunity in your region. Your interest in this space is coming at the exact right time. And it may seem nebulous, like everyone said, you don't know what you don't know. Jump in 2 feet. There's a lot of support there. Find a sponsor, a mentor, however you want to define it. There's a lot of resources and support there, but do your research because there's a lot of opportunities there that can really help you move forward. So with that, I'll pause.
Yeah, Robin, please.
So he just said a couple of things that made me think of maybe it's plugs that I should make, but there are organizations out there, a lot of local and regional ones, intending to help veterans. I mean, I landed in New Hampshire and maybe I didn't find them right in time, but there was an Army 06 retiring, kind of struggling, and a retired general who was, had some disabilities from, wartime stuff. He did like 6 deployments to Afghanistan, all in my local area that also found, hey, this isn't so easy. I think I have all these great skill sets and all this great leadership experience, but transitioning is not easy. And couple of these guys set up an organization which will at least serve maybe Southern Maine, Northeast Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, to pair people who are getting out of the service. And they're mostly geared towards either senior enlisted or officers, but pair them with volunteer business executive mentors, and just to kind of find out what you want to do and help you knock on some doors and help make some contacts. And so we actually have a monthly kind of happy hour where anyone from either side is invited. And since COVID, attendance is down a bit, but we have had some really nice events. And then I know in Norfolk, one that's geared more towards the enlisted side getting out, or maybe junior officers. Actually, my Naval Academy roommates started an organization and that's training veterans specifically for new careers, and sort of it's more in the IT space. But it kind of moves into energy. So there is, I guess, the cyber arena. So there are a lot of things that are springing up like that in regions. And so trying to just find local veterans groups,
Mhm.
I think will really help with the networking. You don't have to figure out how to network all by yourself.
Yeah, I think that's great. And especially if you're, if you're in a group like that and you're able to identify who's in energy or clean energy, then sometimes it's just a matter of getting your foot in the door. And I do want to shift focus here a little bit as to, the clean energy being the reason that we're all here today, and comment that, before the pandemic and even after, veteran unemployment has actually been at all-time lows. And I looked at some of the preliminary numbers at the beginning of the pandemic, and veterans did seem to be faring better than most others in the US. But underemployment is still something that a lot of veterans continue to struggle with. And underemployment might be overqualified, underutilized, or unfulfilled. And for me personally, it's sort of, the reason that I started the Veterans Advanced Energy Project, which was to show veterans how a career in clean energy can help, realign their mission in service to the country after they take off the uniform. And so, Sarah, I'd like to turn to you and maybe talk about this concept of how your career in energy here has allowed you to continue service, and how energy, motivates you to, wake up and go to work every day.
Great. I was ready for the last question. Give me a second. So I think, so I'll just put in a plug for electric utilities. I work for Consumers Energy in Michigan, which is a fantastic place. If you are in Michigan, hit me up and I'm happy to talk to you about how great we are. But utilities are really cool because it is this feeling of service in a way that I haven't experienced since I got out of the military. You are providing power and heat to your neighbors. And whether you are boots on ground in operations in the field, or if you are a suit in the corporate office, there's so many ways to feel that sense of service and tie to your community. And even if you're not the one boots on ground, it's fun to know that that's a part of the work. So I've gotten a lot of fulfillment out of working here. And then talk about front lines of energy transition. Like I said before, there's a lot of different ways to plug in here, but utilities are on the front lines of figuring out what's going to work at a mass adoption scale for all of our customers in a way that is equitable and affordable. And it's just endlessly fascinating how each state is doing a different approach. And so just want to put in a plug there, Dan, because I do feel that sense of service here at the utility and in the energy industry.
Yeah, excellent. Kevin, your thoughts. How do you tie the connection between clean energy and national security?
I think, it's the underlying factor, for me, and I think for a lot of us that we see with the past 20 years of war and where we've been deployed. And it's politics aside, it's hard not to see the connection to oil and kind of, the oil industry globally. So for me, my decision was to be on the other side of that fight, and to contribute locally to economic development, job creation, but resilience. We have the American Resilience Project, of which I'm a board member. We try to highlight through film and engagement, just to highlight some of these connecting stories and the energy transition in the country. So I'd recommend folks to check out the American Resilience Project online and reach out if we could be supportive of your efforts. But from a national security perspective, all things are local, right? If folks don't feel secure at home, it doesn't really matter if we're secure abroad. So hardening our infrastructure at home, flood prevention, hardening our electric infrastructure near our military bases is national security. Ensuring that the free mobility of people is national security. So I think that what a lot of us have seen over the past 20 years is that our time overseas has helped really shape our understanding of our place in the world. But also, the opportunities for us here at home to continue that service, Dan, that you mentioned. What gets me out of bed and gets me interested is is not just simply a day job. There's many organizations in which I'm involved in, some nonprofits, some trade groups. Of course, what I do, my day to day. So that's another thing I would highlight to folks is find multiple areas of engagement, and continue find ways to give back. If there's not an organization that exists, like Robin mentioned, create one. Dan was brief in his mention about how the Vets Energy Project started. I do remember over coffee, he was lamenting that there wasn't an organization like this, and I challenged and said, "Well, start one." Right, and here we are, and he created a great organization here, Dan. So I encourage folks, if it doesn't exist where you're at, start a small group, keep the conversation going, and that will tie back to your service and overall support our national security posture.
And Kevin, we did get a question from the audience asking, today we have a Democratic administration, there will be an election, and with the, changing parties in power, how does that affect the energy transition and specifically opportunities to veterans? And I'll lead this off to say that, from my viewpoint, clean energy here is at the precipice, and there's almost no stopping it now. And so for veterans who are thinking about clean energy, it's my viewpoint that, as you said, it's a great opportunity now to get in, and I don't see that changing just depending on who is president. But I'm curious for your thoughts.
I totally agree, and I'll be brief. I know we're up against time here soon. I think there's a lot of noise around presidential politics. Of course, it's a very compelling arena. But I think the thing to highlight is, looking back to when a lot of these programs started, really started under the Bush administration. You look at the largest deployment of wind in this country is in Texas. Most people wouldn't really know that. And why is that? You have very favorable permitting. You have very knowledgeable energy markets and marketers, and a very business-friendly culture. So I'd say politics aside, I think we're going to see a strong growth in energy, clean energy, and electric mobility. And again, all things are local. No matter what you do, you're going to need to work with your local utility, like Sarah mentioned, at Consumers or wherever you're at, you're going to need to interconnect at one point or another. So there's a lot of business and investment and insurance motives are moving things forward, and I don't see that slowing down, regardless of the midterm elections and/or the next presidential election.
And Robin, as a board member of Conservatives for Responsible Stewardship, I'm just interested in your thoughts on the bipartisan nature of the clean energy transition and supporting veterans and finding jobs to support that.
I definitely agree with the comments made that, irregardless of the elections, these things will move forward. And there are bills on both sides of the aisle that do good things with respect to climate and all of that. I think it's more about demanding that people work together. Because I think, there's always a few exceptions out there that, there's a few dinosaurs or, they're not scientists, but for the most part, people get it on both sides of the aisle. And what we have to shift the dialogue from us versus them, or is there a problem, to just don't even go there. We know there's an issue. So the dialogue needs to be about the range of solutions and not waste time on old arguments that really aren't going anywhere. I know you mentioned the renewable stuff out west, and that is Conservatives for Responsible Stewardship have done a lot of work out, like in Arizona and Nevada. There's a big one in Nevada where they actually had a bill that was shot down along party lines. It was adding renewable, I'm just losing the term because I'm trying to think about, but expanding renewable energy. And that was one thing the president of this organization did, our group, is he went in and one by one talked to just state politicians, and basically the exact same bill came up the next year and passed bipartisan, almost unanimously, because they'd made the case for renewables in a place like Nevada, where you're getting what percentage of your gas and you can't control the prices and it's coming up, but look at the sunshine, and you guys are set up for renewables. And so you can make different arguments to appeal to different audiences. You know, a lot of people, you can make some great, just plain simple economic arguments for renewable and sustainability. Just kind of meet people where they are. You know, you can make religious arguments, economic arguments, just happy green arguments, just, you know, I love animals arguments. You just, I think it's really win-win. It's an issue that everybody can care about. You just got to find which aspect of it appeals to people.
Yeah, and we did get some comments from the audience on some themes we haven't talked about yet. One of them is, you know, the importance specifically of hydropower. We've talked a lot about wind, solar storage. Kevin, you mentioned electric mobility, but of course, hydropower, geothermal, nuclear, hydrogen, biofuel, natural gas. I mean, the cybersecurity, the opportunity within the industry itself is enormous. Pretty much anything you did in the military, you can take those skills and apply them somewhere in the energy industry, is my opinion. And the same commenter also mentioned the upcoming retirements. You know, there is going to be a big change in the workforce here, and for the, you know, post 9/11 generation of veterans, a great opportunity with many positions opening. So I didn't necessarily want to leave that out of the conversation. We are approaching the final minutes of the event here, and so Ian, I wanted to hand it over to you for any of your sort of concluding thoughts about either your transition out of the military, or maybe what do you see veterans bring to the table when they're joining your organization?
What I see is what's already been mentioned a lot. You know, we're pretty resilient, and you know, we're honorable in a sense that, you know, we'll keep the company's objectives in mind. We're here to get the job done. We're committed to getting the job done, and we can do pretty much to a certain point anything that we need to. We're pretty resourceful, and we're highly adaptable to any scenario. Well, most scenarios, you know. And I think that's what a service member does bring to any organization. I'll just keep it short and sweet for now.
Yeah, thank you. And Sarah, I'll turn to you for our final word here. I know you had an answer to a question I didn't ask, if you want to reflect on that, or same to Ian, what it is that you see veterans bringing to the table.
Yeah, so I think similar to Ian, the perspective of knowing when things are really, really important at work, and knowing when it's fine to wait a day, right? Like, we've been in some really stressful environments, and I think having that perspective means that I can trust that veterans are going to prioritize things the right way and not get too spun up about things that don't quite matter. So that's been really helpful, and I see myself trying to coach my own team on that. So that's been helpful. And yeah, what I was going to say earlier, Dan, the best advice I had transitioning was that people are going to assume something when they see military on your resume. And so the best use of your time in an interview is to disprove the bad assumptions and show some things that they might not assume. So people are going to assume that you're highly disciplined, very reliable, motivated, like team player, but they might be assuming you're very hierarchical, maybe kind of direct, aggressive. So use your time to showcase the positives and be aware of what some negative things might be that you can prove otherwise.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So we have come to the conclusion of the event. I want to thank you all in the audience for joining us for the important conversation, and thanks to all of our speakers, Kevin, Ian, Sarah, Robin, and Mr. Rodriguez, for being here to share your perspectives. If you want to stay engaged with us, I know that everyone here would love to connect with you on LinkedIn, and you can also visit the website vetsenergyproject.org to see more Veterans in Energy and events coming up next year. Of course, this being the last day of Veterans Month, we want to thank all of our service members, veterans, and their families for their sacrifices and contributions, and wishing you all a great rest of the week. Thank you.